All right, so last week I was showing you my new drum machine, the RX-17. This is a drum machine from 1987. It's kind of cool. It's kind of cheesy. I kind of like it, but it is somewhat limited in what you can do with it because it's got these really short samples that kind of cut off the tails of the cymbals and stuff like this. I don't know if you really notice it while a song is playing, but individually it sounds kind of dated. There's no round robins, there's no multi-sampling, there's no randomization, humanization, anything like that. But I did sample it and then turn this into a virtual instrument, something that goes beyond the capabilities of the original hardware. Here's how it looks currently. I'm calling this 1987 drums, just to give it a unique name that's not clearly saying that that's the samples from that. I've sampled it with different layers of effects. So there's a clean layer, there's two different types of distortion. Those distortion layers also have a slap delay on them for some nice width. There are two reverbs from the Alesis MIDI Verb 3. And then Verb 3 is an early reflection reverb from the Yamaha REX50. And that was kind of the main concept and all the different layers that I want to include in this. I spent basically a whole week on this. Yesterday, I decided that some of the layers get kind of harsh and sort of out of balance. So, for example, the cymbals, they're just extremely loud because they're a more sustained sound. And so they hit the distortion a little bit differently. So I just added a slider here for the cymbals and the percussion layers. Original instrument has 26 samples. I'm actually going to load up my sampling project. If we take this, so here's the original kick. Actually, no, let's go to the snare. Here's the original snare. And it's not bad. It seems a little short, right? So what I did was this. I extended the tail. And I did that with basically everything. Everything important. So here's the original crash. It seems to just smoothly decay and then stop. And then here is the longer, not stretched, but like it decays down over time much longer, much smoother, I think. So the only ones I didn't do that were for the whistle and kuika, but they're just bad sounds that you're probably not going to use anyways. So original whistle, kuika. You're probably not going to use those sounds in a production, but they're there for completeness, and I didn't loop them but I didn't extend the tails because they didn't really need it. So that's the agogo high bell, and just longer. Then I've got the different layers, and so this was quite a lot of sample chopping, and dynamic split didn't work very well. And if I did find a setting for one thing with dynamic split, it didn't work for the next thing. And then we've got decent sampler. So this was actually what the first version of this looked like. So just these dials for each thing. And then the current version. Let's go through this. So that's the first version. That's the second version with these sliders, and then the third version has like a mixer for the different layers, and then adjustments, trims really for the cymbals and the percussion, like shells, the hand percussion, like bongos, congas, timbales. Anything with like a skin goes in percussion 1, and percussion 2 is all of the metal percussion, essentially. There's two things that aren't in a group currently. Hand claps and the rim shot, they are with the rest of the drum kit. I don't know. Maybe you guys can decide where those should go. But for now, they're not as big of a problem as the cymbals and percussion. What did you build the plugin in? This is Decent Sampler. Yeah, so this is just Decent Sampler, which is a free alternative to KONTAKT. It enables people to make samples and build something. Like this proof of concept, this first one, this was an evening. This was 2-3 hours maybe. And this final version was probably another 4 days of just slightly adjusting the the position of the letters and changing the spacing of this over and over and over. The actual coding, this is like, I think we're over 28,000 characters in this, but it's actually very simple, and it starts out much simpler than it is. So we'll get to that. Here's a preset. Okay, so there's the original clean sounds, not original sounds, but these are the extended length samples. So it's just a little bit longer. We've got a slider for the cymbals. Okay, and then we've got a distortion layer, and these are meant to be blended in with the original. So distortion A is a big muff, the black Russian big muff, into a TC Electronic flashback with the slap delay setting in stereo. Distortion B is a rat pedal. Verb 1 is a MIDI verb. Verb 2 is MIDI verb. And I think the difference is one's a hall and one is a chamber. And then verb 3 is the Rex 50. And then there is also low pass and high pass filters. So you can cut off all the highs, all the lows if you want. What's this other pattern? Okay, I don't have any preset or any patterns with all the different percussion instruments, but here's what they sound like. Lots of Latin percussion stuff that you're probably not going to use all that much. But I can see this being useful for electro-punk, electronic punk music, early 90s home recording vibe, 4-track recorder, drum machine, out-of-tune acoustic guitar sort of thing. Let's actually change the tempo. Let's change this to like 90 beats per minute. So I think with the adjustments of the samples here, it's a fairly versatile sound. You can do so much more than the original hardware. Other than the sequencing stuff, it sounds much better than the real hardware. This could totally be used as a synthwave kit. Yeah, feels like Depeche Mode cover should be coming. Does Decent Sampler not have a kind of volume control associated with velocity? It does, actually. Yeah, so let me just go to the clean. It's automatic, actually, so that made it really nice. I think the velocity scaling on my actual Poly D is set kind of weird. I didn't do round robins. I was thinking last night that I probably could do some like slightly filtered versions, or maybe a very slight pitch adjustment for the snare to just get some variation so it doesn't have that machine gun effect. But yeah, I didn't. I didn't yet. I'm not sure. I think it should still sound like a cheesy drum machine at the end, but with some effects to get it started. Yeah, just varying the velocity can help with the machine gun effect. But the real one does that. And so I don't really want to change that all that much. I will find some way to share this. I'll probably put it up on the blog. That's probably the easiest way for me to share it. And if I need to make an update, I'll just have the link there. Maybe it will go up in Pianobook as well. I haven't looked into submitting something to Pianobook, but maybe that's something I should do. I don't want to make it too complicated for you or for me. Mainly, this was just trying to get some more use out of this drum machine. It's just a simple drum machine. You can get them for $100 on Reverb, but they're quite limited in the sounds they have, and using them, having to go out through MIDI and then going in through hardware. It's kind of a pain. So as a sampler, this does a lot more. The other reason I did this is I wanted to learn Decent Sampler. There are some resources for this. I couldn't do this without a few different videos about this topic. So I think it was this one, How Do You Make Free Sample Libraries in Decent Sampler? This one here was really helpful. There was just an amazing trick with Sublime Text. You hold down Control and Shift, and then you can use the arrow keys, and then your cursor spans multiple lines. It's so helpful for this sort of stuff. So there's that video, and then how to make a template for sampling, how to use Decent Sampler, how to make presets for Decent Sampler, various videos from David Hilowitz. Super helpful stuff. Plus there's all the documentation, format documentation for Decent Sampler. This stuff, I've spent hours on this page over the past week. It seems like a lot of stuff, but it starts out very simply. So let's take it from the top, kind of. Decent Sampler, plugin version 1, give it a preset name, basic stuff. And at the end, you just close that basically like an HTML tag, / Decent Sampler. So you open up the section and you close it with a /. Very similar to anything you do on the web. Then there's some UI stuff, and this is always optional. It can look like the default thing if you don't put anything into the UI section. But essentially, you choose your background image, and I'll just show you in Pixelmator Pro what I made. I think it's pretty basic, but effective. So we've got a shape at the background. What's your background color? Then I wanted something that resembles the physical design of the drum machine. Is these ribs, these grill marks. So in the software, I've got these. And I went through a few different iterations of this. One version had these sort of corners, we'll say. You could see the ends. But it didn't end up translating to the plugin as nicely as I wanted. This is kind of the box for the controls. I've got a paper texture over the whole thing. Then I've got this paint texture. Let me try to find that original image. So I collect textures and stuff. So here's the original texture that I used. So this is just paint on a metal grate. But that ends up being some grunge on the plugin. I've got some painter's tape for the logo. And the painter's tape is something that I just had in my my video stock. So painter's tape element just looks like this, just a scanned transparent painter's tape. And this I just changed the colors on it to make it white. And then actually a little more involved, but it's essentially this piece of tape. I should just make my own. And I got some text on top and then my own logo there. All the rest that you see in the plugin is made by the plugin. So all these sliders, the frames for the sliders, the knobs, the text, that's all generated in the plugin. Decent Sampler stuff is scalable. It's not like super smooth. Like, I wish the keyboard stayed like in the middle, or there's a way to like jump back to the original size at some point. This stuff kind of made the UI design kind of hard because I couldn't like measure it properly. If I wanted to like figure out the position of things, I had to like use the screenshot tool in Mac and then go from the edge. If I had scaled the plugin, it would be inaccurate. So it's just a lot of like changing the position by like 2 pixels, saving it, and then reloading. Back to the code. This keyboard section in the UI is just for the different colors on the keys. Then we've got the tab section. Tab section is the labels and the controls. This one here is the text that says mixer. We have X and Y coordinates. We have the text size, text color, the width and height of the bounding box. And I'll show you what a bounding box is here. So File, Developer Tools, and then Show Bounding Boxes. And so these are the boxes around each of the elements. You don't need to worry about them too much unless they're overlapping. These round knobs, you can have the hit target kind of off. And when you're adjusting one instead of the other. These ones work fine. Like, you have to be like inside the knob. But I did have some in the early version where they were overlapping. Because I had that sort of scattered layout, the diagonal layout, zigzag, whatever you want to call it. And so some of the controls were overlapping with the bounding boxes too big. You ended up moving the wrong thing if you were clicking just slightly off of the target. If you're building this stuff, you're probably going to be using the labeled knob, which is the round knobs, and those include text above, X and Y position, the width and height. So this is the size of the actual knob, not just the label. Text size 20. This text size number is a little confusing. Maybe it's just the scaling issue, but sometimes this text 20 is smaller than text size 14. A little weird. Something I ran into. There's the label text color. Type is a floating point value. Minimum and maximum value for the knob. So fully to the left, is that going to be a 0? Fully to the right, is that a 1? And then value equals 1 is the starting point value. Is this Sublime Text? Yes, it's Sublime Text. Are those parameters surfaced to MIDI control in the DAW? Yes, these labeled knobs are labeled correctly. I haven't figured out how to get these other sliders to work. Not to work, but like to display correctly. So here, parameters 1 to 9 are the vertical sliders. LPF, HPF, those are displayed correctly in the parameter list. But I haven't figured out the trick to getting these ones. Probably something very simple. Okay, so binding is actually attaching the knob to a parameter. So binding type effect, level instrument. So that's sort of like which section of the rest of the code is it going to look for it. A lot of the controls use this position value. Like if you have 3 filters, they're automatically ordered from 0 to 2 for 3 filters. So position 0 is the first filter, and then parameter is the first filter's frequency, effects_filter_frequency. And so for the difference here for the low pass and the high pass is just this position 0 versus position 1. This is the first filter, this is the second filter. Everything else is the same, although I did change the starting value here. I got this translation table, I think, just from the documentation. This is just copied out of the website documentation. Sliders, a little different. So this is the slider for the percussion 2. So label size and position, already explained. Control is a linear bar vertical. And again, this is stuff that I got from the documentation and a little bit of experimentation, like changing the colors. Binding type amp, so amplifier. Level tag. So the samples can be tagged to allow you to control them in different ways, but they're sort of like ways to tap into different things from different sections of the UI. Tag identifier percussion 2. So any sample that I've tagged as percussion 2, I can control its amplifier volume from the slider. Tags are also used for mute groups. That's essentially it for the controls. There's a lot of trial and error in getting things positioned, aligned, all that stuff. But essentially that's the UI stuff. Then there's groups and group. So groups is a section of the script that contains all the other groups. So an individual group can have effects, the group section can have effects, and also the overall instrument can have effects, and that's where I put mine. So effects, this comes after group, so it's the instrument level, and I just have my 2 filters there. In addition to these, there are a couple other effects. There's a bandpass filter, there is a convolution reverb, a basic algorithmic reverb, a delay, there's a wave shaper. I think there's some other ones. They're all listed on the website. There is not a basic equalizer, just 3 different filters. So if you want to EQ your samples, you kind of have to do that with batch processing or in the actual sampling process. But volume adjustments are very easy. Let's look at just the clean samples. So groups volume minus 3 dB, straight out of the gate, everything is turned down by 3 dB. And I believe that is this setting here, volume minus 3. I'm pretty sure that that's what that's linked to. I put in attack 0, decay 0, sustain 1, release at 1200, and release curve 100 because things were getting weird if I would hold keys or not hold keys. This is kind of just keeping the samples, just straight one shots. So a long release, 1200 milliseconds, I believe, not samples, but it was just a little bit weird without this stuff. So this is just kind of making sure that everything triggers the exact same. And this is at the groups level. Then you could have all this stuff at the sample level or at the individual group level, but this is what I did. With this sample library, because there's all these different layers, I wasn't sure how I would organize it at first, but I believe that groups is the only way that I could have organized this, where I've got all these samples playing simultaneously with the different effects. It would have been much more complicated to do it any other way, I think. Yeah, the sampling stuff is very, very time consuming. But it's kind of fun because at least with Decent Sampler, it was like very quick to get a proof of concept. And then it's just a lot of little tweaks to get it finished. A lot of this stuff can be done in templates. So group ID, clean, volume 1. These are the original samples. And then you've got the low note, the high note, the root note, all the same because these are drum samples. If it was other things and you want to stretch them across keys, obviously change these numbers. Then there's a path to the sample, to the actual file. The length control, I did not experiment with this. I just chose a number that I saw somebody else use. But essentially, like, if this is too short, it's going to shorten the length of the sound. What you are technically supposed to do is use the exact number of samples, I think -1 of the actual file, but you can use a larger number, that's fine. And then sample rate, 48,000. I wish that this could just be put somewhere else. I don't know if it can. I would prefer to have these sample sections because I spend so much time in this section simplified, but you can't, as far as I know. Okay, and then here's the tags. So the shaker goes on percussion 2 tag. The hi-hat is a special one because I want the open hi-hat to mute if the closed hi-hat is triggered. Is there already base code? there are templates and stuff. So like this is essentially like copy and paste, and the only thing you need to change is this. The formatting and all this stuff, there's templates, there's Excel, there's spreadsheets so you can drop in stuff. A lot of it has been done before, and anytime I was confused and I couldn't find it in documentation, I just opened up another person's library to figure out how they did it. For the hi-hats, you can see here that I have both tags cymbals and hi-hat clean. And then silence tags, hi-hat clean. Silence mode fast. So this is what you do for the mute groups or choke groups, that sort of thing. So when I play a close hi-hat after an open hi-hat, it mutes. Like that. I don't know if this is a bug or what, but if you use the same silenced by group, I found that it would cause all of the notes to start repeating. Every note would play 3 times if I used the same group or the same tag for the mute groups. I don't know if this is a coincidence, but I changed each of the groups or the tags for each of the mute groups in each set of samples to a different one. So the big muff samples, these are hi-hat, muff, etc. through the other groups. And that seemed to have cleared up that bug. It was driving me crazy. I don't know why it does that, but like I would play a tom and it would play 3 times. That seems to have gone away. I don't know if it was just changing the groups or because I set a release time. That was at least half an hour wasted trying to figure that out. Some of this stuff I could improve by tabs and stuff. I haven't found a shortcut to like clean up indentation in Sublime Text, but it would help. There's a few things that I could have done better just to get organized. I could have used much shorter sample names. I also exported both the original clean sample, or not original, but like the short, unadjusted sample and the long, and then each version of the effects also got exported. And so I had, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different samples that I had in my folder that didn't end up getting used in the actual sampler. And so there was just clutter and annoying. And the exported samples, they had some extra digits and stuff. I should have cleaned that up at the start. I had to batch rename things. So that's one thing I changed between version 1 and version 02, this one. Another really annoying thing that I did to myself was exporting the samples with metadata. I used the title metadata to put in RX-17 drum samples as the title. And then in macOS Finder, when you're searching for something, it doesn't show you the file name under the name section. It shows you the title. And this will happen with music files in general. Anything that has metadata, it's going to show the title field instead of the file name field. And when you do that, you can't copy all of the file names and paste them somewhere. So I was looking for like clean long as the file name to get all of the 26 different drums with just the clean long file names. I couldn't do it. There was no way to copy it without having to erase the metadata. But I had already implemented all this stuff before figuring that out. But that was another thing that was like, if I just had a better file name, now if I didn't export with metadata, I would have been able to just select everything and drop it into the spreadsheet and export it easily, but I didn't. I mentioned the spreadsheet a couple times. I'll just quickly show you what that looks like. It's not even like the best version of this. This is a thing you can do just to kind of help get all of the text in the right sections. There's a couple fields within the sampler thing here, right? Low note, high note, root note, path, tags you could put in here, but length and sample rate, those generally stay the same. So I've got the spreadsheet with different columns, so I can change the low note, the high note, the root note, and the path. Samples slash is always going to be the same based on how you build out your library. But this is the main thing we paste into. Then at the end, you just select the whole line, copy it, paste it. There is a way to like get all the stuff from here to here, put it in there as a single line. I could not figure it out, but taking this like this and then pasting it in here, it puts in these long gaps, and that's really annoying too. So one of the things I found useful, there's a way to have two documents open at the same time with rows 2. Yeah, like this. So I would paste in my thing here, and then I can clean this up. Oops. I can clean this up a little bit nicer before finally putting it into the actual thing. Still on the topic of my mistakes, or the things that I would have done differently, I was doing all of the kicks, all of the snares in each of the groups, and then moving on to the next instrument. So I did the kicks, snare, hi-hats, then the toms, then I did some of the other samples, and I would do a drum for each group at a time. What I really should have done was do the entire kit for one group and then duplicate that. And all I would need to do is change the word clean to muff or to rat or to verb 1, and I would have been done. But it took hours, took a full day to get it into these 6 sections, doing them like one at a time, even with the spreadsheet, because of all of the formatting that needed to be redone every time. I had to fix all that formatting for every drum 6 times instead of doing it once, getting everything formatted, and then find and replace within selection or something like that. That's essentially it. I think I've said everything about building it. I will show you one other thing that's really helpful. So once you make a small change and you want to see that, you can reload by dragging and dropping the library in again. But you can also go to File and then Reload. And that will reload the samples. It will reset to the defined factory defaults for all the parameters. So that's all super useful. I think that's everything for that topic. Has anyone in the chat ever made something in Decent Sampler, or even have you used Decent Sampler? This week, when I would say, I finally figured out Decent Sampler, or I've made my first Decent Sampler, everyone's like, oh, what sampler? So Decent Sampler is not the quality, it's the product. Seems a bit complicated. Doing it all at once is complicated. Doing it one thing at a time is actually not too complicated. And those videos that I mentioned earlier, and when I make a video of those will be linked. Those videos do a good job of breaking it down and really just having like a plan of what features you want, how you want it laid out, and stuff like that. That really helps. The programming stuff has not been that complicated. The syntax is very much like HTML. So it's just like a lot of repetition. Just approaching it the right way is really the trick to it. The actual coding is easy. It's not that difficult. You don't need to know code really. Just remember to like close your what do you call it? Close these things with a slash at the end. Make sure that there's quotations after an equals. Watch out for like extra spaces after a file name. Yeah, like if I do that and save it and then reload this, the whole thing breaks. It would be nice if it showed you, actually it does, okay. It actually does show you the error. I feel like it doesn't always show you what kind of error it is. So it missed one file, so it will abort loading. But if there's other issues, problem with the UI or something like that, then the whole thing just breaks. But if you have any samples that you want to be able to play on a keyboard or just get more use out of them, I think this is worth exploring because it's free. It's far less complicated than KONTAKT, and it's easy to share. All those reasons make it a great piece of software. Obviously not as powerful as KONTAKT, but you can build some really decent, sorry, no pun intended, really decent virtual instruments using this.